Have you ever picked up a handful of dark, healthy soil and paused for a moment, realizing that what rests in your palm is not just dirt, but a living world? Beneath that simple handful are microbes, roots, minerals, moisture, and countless tiny processes working together to support life. Welcome back to Golden Harvest, where we look deeper into the soil, the garden, and the farm to understand the old wisdom and practical science that help plants truly thrive. Today we are going to talk about one of the simplest garden secrets ever passed from one generation to the next. It is so ordinary that many people pour it down the sink without thinking twice. I am talking about rice water. For thousands of years, farmers across Asia have used the water from rinsing rice and returned it to the soil, trusting that nothing useful from the kitchen should be wasted when the land can receive it. Modern research is now showing what traditional growers understood through experience. When rice water is used correctly, it can support beneficial soil bacteria, help with natural nitrogen activity, and encourage the production of plant growth hormones. But here is where many gardeners go wrong. In the search for fast results, this old practice has been turned into a quick fix trick. And that is where the danger begins. Every day, people who genuinely love their houseplants, vegetables, and backyard gardens are using rice water in ways that may suffocate roots, weaken the soil, and harm the very plants they are trying to help. A remedy that once supported living soil can become a problem when it is overused, left to rot, sprayed in the wrong place, or treated like a complete fertilizer. So how does something so natural become harmful? Where is the line between feeding a healthy soil ecosystem and creating a sour, decaying pot that slowly damages the roots? If you are ready to stop guessing and start working with nature instead of against it, let's break it down clearly. Today we will go through 6 serious rice water mistakes that can kill plants, understand the science behind them, clear away the myths, and learn how to use this simple liquid with wisdom, balance, and real gardening experience. Part 1. The Starvation Myth. Mistake number 1. The Complete Fertilizer Myth. Imagine your body is weak and hungry, and instead of a real meal, someone gives you one small vitamin tablet. It may contain something useful, but it cannot replace food. That is the same mistake many gardeners make when they treat rice water as a complete, all-in-one fertilizer for their plants. When tomato leaves begin to yellow or cucumber vines slow down and look weak, it is very common to hear someone say, "Just pour rice water on them." But as someone who has worked with soil, crops, and home gardens for many years, I can tell you this clearly. Rice water can help, but it is not a full meal for your plants. Rice water may contain small traces of B vitamins, including thiamine, and tiny amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But the key word here is tiny. These nutrients are present in very weak diluted amounts. Compared with a standard vegetable fertilizer, such as a 555 NPK fertilizer, rice water may contain only around 0.01 to 0.05% of those nutrients. In simple terms, it can be hundreds of times weaker than actual plant food. In its raw form, rice water provides almost no meaningful nitrogen, almost no phosphorus, and very little calcium. So we should not think of it as fertilizer in the traditional sense. It is not the main meal. It is more like fuel for soil microbes. The starch in rice water feeds microscopic life in the soil. Those microbes can help break down organic matter and support the plant indirectly. If your soil is already exhausted, poor, and lacking real nutrients, rice water cannot magically create nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, or minerals from nothing. Microbes still need something to work with. This is where many plants begin to suffer. A gardener stops using compost, skips balanced fertilizer, and depends only on rice water because it sounds natural and easy. Over time, the plant does not become stronger. It slowly starves. So before you pour rice water into the soil, ask yourself honestly, am I truly feeding this plant? Or am I only giving the soil a quick starch boost while the plant is still begging for real nutrition? The pathogen trap. Mistake number 2. The rotten brew or the pathogen trap. Fermentation has become very popular, and for good reason. When it is done properly, fermentation can create helpful lactic acid bacteria and yeasts. These organisms can support root health, help break down organic matter, and improve the activity of living soil. But there is a very thin line between good fermentation and plain rotting. Many gardeners make rice water, seal it in a jar, and leave it sitting for a week or even longer, believing that the longer it sits, the more powerful it becomes. That is a dangerous misunderstanding. When rice water sits too long, especially without enough oxygen, the living community inside that liquid begins to change. Instead of encouraging useful organisms, the mixture can become dominated by anaerobic, decay-loving bacteria. Good fermentation usually has a mild sour smell, something like yogurt, sourdough, or a light fermented grain smell. Rotten rice water is different. It smells foul, heavy, and unpleasant. Sometimes it gives off an odor like rotten eggs because of hydrogen sulfide. That smell is a warning, not a sign of strength. When you pour this rotten liquid into your soil, you are not helping the plant. The organic acids can push the soil pH down sharply, sometimes to extremely acidic levels around 3.5 or 4.0. At that point, tender root hairs can be damaged very quickly. These tiny root hairs are the parts that absorb water and nutrients. So once they are burned or weakened, the plant begins to struggle. Even worse, this sour, decaying environment can encourage serious fungal problems. Pathogens such as Pythium and Fusarium thrive in wet, weakened root zones and can lead to damping off, root rot, and sudden plant decline. If your rice water smells like garbage, do not convince yourself it is a powerful natural fertilizer. It is more likely a source of infection. Trust your nose. If the smell is not mildly sour and clean, throw it away. A garden should be built on good biology, not bad science. Part 3, the daily drench mistake number 3, the daily drench and organic overload. One of the most common gardening mistakes comes from good intentions. We think if a little helps, then more must help even more. But soil does not work that way. Many indoor plants and container plants are damaged because people pour concentrated rice water into the pot every single day. Soil is a living ecosystem, but it also has limits. It can only process a certain amount of organic material at one time. Rice water contains starch, and when too much fresh starch enters the soil faster than microbes can break it down, the root zone becomes overloaded. Instead of creating balance, you create a biological traffic jam. During decomposition, microbes use oxygen. When there is too much starch, microbial activity can consume oxygen faster than it can be replaced. The result is a suffocating root environment. Roots need oxygen to function. Without it, they cannot absorb nutrients properly, and the delicate root tips can begin to die within a short time. Excess starch can also behave like glue in the soil. It binds with fine soil particles and can form a crust on the surface of a pot. When that crust dries, it may become hard and compact, blocking air and water from moving naturally into the soil. The gardener thinks they are feeding the plant, but in reality they may be sealing the soil shut. This is why rice water should never be used like daily irrigation. Fresh rice water should be diluted, usually at least 1 part rice water to 4 parts plain water. And even then, it should be used only occasionally, perhaps once every week or two, depending on the plant, the soil, and the growing conditions. The goal is not to flood the soil with kindness. The goal is to support its rhythm. So ask yourself, am I helping the living soil breathe and work, or am I drowning it with too much of a good thing? Part 4, the foliar feeding fallacies mistake number 4, the foliar feeding fallacy. This is one of those mistakes that looks harmless, but can cause real damage. You may have seen people fill a spray bottle with cloudy rice water and mist it directly onto the leaves of monsteras, pothos, or other houseplants, believing they are feeding the plant through the foliage. But we need to understand how a leaf actually works. Leaves have tiny pores called stomata. These pores help the plant breathe, exchange gases, and release moisture through transpiration. They are not built to digest thick, complex materials like raw starch from rice water. When rice water is sprayed onto leaves, the water eventually evaporates. What stays behind is a sticky layer of starch. That film can cling to the leaf surface and block those tiny breathing pores. Once that happens, the leaf cannot function properly. The plant's ability to breathe and photosynthesize drops, and over time it becomes weaker instead of stronger. There is another problem as well. A warm leaf covered with a damp, starchy film becomes an easy feeding ground for fungal spores and bacteria floating in the air. It can invite problems like powdery mildew and bacterial leaf spots, especially in humid conditions or areas with poor airflow. Rice water belongs in the soil, where soil microbes can break it down and turn it into something useful. It does not belong on the surface of the leaves. Keep the leaves clean so they can absorb sunlight, exchange air, and do their job. Let the soil, not the foliage, handle the rice water. Part 5. The Kitchen Scraps Blender Mistake Number 5. The kitchen scraps blender, spices, and boiling water. Sometimes when we try to reduce waste in the kitchen, we take a good idea too far. Many people save water from boiling pasta or water left after cooking rice with salt, oil, or seasoning and pour it straight into their plant pots. This can be a serious mistake. First, let's talk about salt. Sodium chloride is extremely harmful to plants when it builds up in the soil. It increases the osmotic pressure around the roots. Instead of the roots taking in water from the soil, the salty soil starts pulling water out of the roots. The plant becomes dehydrated even when the pot looks wet, and root cells can begin to die. Oils and fats create another problem. They coat soil particles and make the soil repel water and air. When oxygen cannot move through the root zone, roots begin to suffocate. A plant may look like it needs more care, but the real problem is that the soil has been clogged by kitchen residue. Boiled rice water is also risky. When rice is heated above about 60 degrees Celsius, the starch changes structure and releases amylose and amylopectin, turning the water thicker and more glue-like. If this liquid is poured onto soil while hot, it can shock and damage the roots almost immediately. Even after cooling, that concentrated cooked starch can coat roots and soil particles like a sticky film, encouraging rot instead of healthy growth. So keep the rules simple. Use only cold raw rice, rinse water. Never use cooked, salted, oily, seasoned, or hot kitchen leftovers on your plants. Part 6. The Dead Inoculant Mistake Number 6. The Dead Inoculant and the Empty Rinses. Now we come to one of the most overlooked mistakes. To understand it, we need to ask a simple question. Why does rice water help in the first place? Part of its value comes from the living biological community found on the surface of the rice grain. These natural organisms can support microbial activity in the soil, help with nitrogen-related processes, and contribute to natural plant growth hormones. But not all rice is equal. Much of the commercial rice sold in supermarkets has been heavily processed. Some grains may carry pesticide residues from the field. Some may go through post-harvest fumigation to control storage pests, which can also reduce the natural microbial life on the grain. Bleaching, polishing, and coating processes can further strip away the natural biological layer that makes rice water useful. When you rinse heavily treated rice, you may not be collecting a living, helpful inoculant. You may be collecting weak water with chemical residues that can suppress the very soil life you are trying to encourage. Whenever possible, choose organic or less processed rice if you want rice water to support your garden in a meaningful way. Another mistake is saving the later rinses. Many people throw away the first cloudy wash and keep the third, fourth, or fifth rinse because it looks cleaner. But that cloudy first rinse is where most of the water-soluble nutrients, starches, vitamins, and biological material are released. By the third wash, the water is often nearly clear and contains very little useful value. So do not waste your effort saving empty rinses and wondering why nothing changes. If you want the benefit, save the first cloudy wash. That is the rinse that carries the most life and usefulness for the soil. Conclusion: so, is rice water a myth? No. Rice water can be a useful and powerful traditional tool. But it is not a magic wand. It is biology in a jar, and biology only works when we respect balance. When we pour concentrated, rotten, salty, oily, cooked, or chemically contaminated water into already struggling pots, we are not practicing good gardening. We are creating stress in the root zone. But when we understand the relationship between starch, microbes, oxygen, and soil structure, rice water becomes much safer and more useful. Use it diluted, use it sparingly. Pair it with real compost, healthy soil, and proper plant nutrition. Rice water should support the soil ecosystem, not replace everything your plant truly needs. Gardening is not about forcing a plant to grow. It is about building a living environment where roots can breathe, microbes can work, and plants can naturally thrive. When you stop treating rice water like a miracle cure and start using it as one small part of a healthy soil system, you begin to work with nature instead of against it. If this helped you see your soil in a new way, join the Golden Harvest family and keep learning with us. Share this with someone who loves their plants, but may be loving them a little too hard. Until next time, keep your hands dirty, keep your mind open, and may your harvest always be golden.